What's going on, y'all? Today we got the NBA if Michael Jordan never existed. Let's get into it.
This isn't a video I was originally planning on doing, but it's been a highly requested one, and it can be a fun look at what could have been if Michael Jordan wasn't around dominating the 90s. In theory, Jordan could have played in any era and would have diminished the legacies of his competitors in it. So if anything, hopefully this video will help us appreciate some of the overlooked legends of Jordan's playing days. Now there's a couple different ways to look at a scenario like this. Option 1, you could hypothetically remove Jordan from existence and then speculate the entire ripple and butterfly effect of this move. This literally would change almost everything in the NBA's history since Jordan was drafted. Because if Jordan isn't on the Bulls, then Chicago doesn't win the same amount of games each season, which means draft positions completely change, which means team needs change, which then mean completely different trades and free agency signings are made league-wide. It would totally flip the league upside down. Now there's several NBA YouTubers who have made videos with this specific style, and they're pretty entertaining to a lot of people. But I'm not gonna lie, I really don't like this format too much, because in my opinion, it's way too speculative and completely impossible to accurately guess each ripple effect of the initial change. Now option 2, which is the option I'm going with, is to take the events of the NBA's already written history and simply remove Jordan from that specific timeline, and see how it would have affected the league in a very direct way. So in this video, we'll take a look at 3 aspects, which are the scoring titles, the MVPs, and the championships. Among those, the championships are the only aspect that involves some guesswork, while the others require us to simply look at the runner-up to Jordan in each of those seasons and give him the award as a result. Let's start with the scoring titles. Michael Jordan has by far the most scoring crowns in NBA history with a total of 10. The first 2 seasons, which are 1987 and 1988, now go to one of Jordan's rivals from the Eastern Conference, Dominique Wilkins. He averaged 29 points per game in '87 and 30.7 points in 1988. The human highlight film is now known primarily for his all-time great dunking ability, but back in his prime, he was so much more than just that. Yes, he was an overall incredible athlete, but he was also graceful, had terrific footwork, and was a lethal scorer from the mid-range. It's as Dominique has said about himself before, you don't get over 26,000 points in your career by simply dunking the basketball. The next 4 straight seasons all go to the same player. 1990, 91, 92, and 93 all go to the mailman, Karl Malone, where he averaged 31, 29, 28, and 27 points per game. Karl was obviously a powerful finisher around the rim, but he also had an incredibly smooth jump shot. A lethal combination that translated into him being one of the most dominant scorers of NBA history. The 90s weren't known for their high scoring numbers, and in the entirety of the 90s decade, Malone was the only player other than Jordan to eclipse 30 points per game for a season. He was offensively lethal at a time where that wasn't very common, and Jordan himself was a major reason why Malone's offensive dominance is rarely noticed or mentioned these days. 1993 brings back a familiar face, as Dominique Wilkins once again takes the scoring crown at 29.9 points per game. This would have been his 4th scoring title of his career. At this point, he was 33 years old and was returning from a torn Achilles, which in combination with his age, strongly decreased his athletic ability. With that being said, he was able to expand upon his game and became a lethal 3-point shooter, shooting 38% from that distance while being 7th in the league in attempts per game. In 1996, the scoring crown now goes to Hakeem Olajuwon at 26.9 points per game. Many remember the Dream, as they should, as one of the greatest defensive players of all time, but many forget just how good he was offensively, as he was capable of leading the league in scoring with his impeccable footwork and his soft touch around the mid-range. In 1997, Karl Malone would have once again won the scoring title at 27.4 points, which takes him from 0 with Jordan to a total of 5 scoring titles without MJ, which would have put him only behind Wilt Chamberlain for the most scoring titles in NBA history. In 1998, Shaquille O'Neal takes the scoring title at 28.3 points. As a 25-year-old, this was around the beginning of Shaq's prime, as he bullied and dominated just about every opponent in the paint. Here's a quick recap of where the scoring titles go now with Jordan out of the picture. Feel free to pause the video for a longer look. Next up, we'll take a look at Jordan's 5 MVPs going elsewhere. The 1988 MVP now goes to the Celtics' Larry Bird, who would have won the MVP in about 95% of other seasons with this kind of performance. He led Boston to a 57-25 record as he put up 29.9 points, 9.3 rebounds, 6.1 assists, and 1.6 steals on 52.7% shooting. He also had a 50-40-90 season, making this the second highest scoring 50-40-90 season of all time. This also would have been his fourth MVP in just a 5-year stretch. The 1991 MVP now goes to Magic Johnson, which was his final full season in the NBA. He led Los Angeles to a 58-24 record while putting up 19.4 points, 12.5 assists, 7 rebounds, and 1.3 steals on 47.7% shooting. This was only the beginning of his impressive 1991 campaign, which was overshadowed by Jordan. We'll get into the rest of his incredible season in a bit. The 1992 MVP now goes to Clyde the Glide Drexler, who led his Blazers to a 57-25 record. Drexler put up a well-rounded 25 points, 6.6 rebounds, 6.7 assists, and 1.8 steals on 47% shooting. It's easy to see why Drexler's legacy gets somewhat overlooked when at best he was simply seen as a discount version of Michael Jordan. Without MJ in the picture, Clyde's legacy becomes one of the biggest beneficiaries of the GOAT's absence. The 1996 MVP now goes to David Robinson, who led the Spurs to a 59-23 record. The 30-year-old was dominant throughout the regular season on both sides of the court. He played in all 82 games and put up 25 points, 12.2 rebounds, 3 assists, and 3.3 blocks on 51.6% shooting. The 1998 MVP now goes to Karl Malone, which in hindsight would give him a total of 3 league MVP awards. Karl led Utah to a 62-20 record, which was tied for the best record in the league. He did it with numbers of 27 points, 10.3 rebounds, 3.9 assists, and 1.2 steals on 53% shooting. Now for likely the most interesting part of the video, which is the championships. This is the only part of the video that involves some analyzed guessing, so let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with these choices. In the 1991 NBA Finals, the Chicago Bulls defeated the Los Angeles Lakers in 5 games. But to get there, they had to beat the Detroit Pistons in the Eastern Conference Finals, which means this hypothetical finals matchup would have been between likely Isaiah Thomas's Pistons and Magic Johnson's Lakers. In my opinion, this would have been a fantastic series, and there's a strong likelihood that it would have gone 7 games. There's this narrative about the 1991 Detroit Pistons that the team was old at this point, and that's why the younger Chicago Bulls swept them out of the East Finals. But that's simply not true. Maybe they were tired and worn down from their 5th straight season with a deep postseason run, but they certainly were not old. At the start of that season, Joe Dumars was 27, Isaiah Thomas was 29, Dennis Rodman was 29, and Bill Laimbeer was 33. Not only were their best players not old, but most of them were at a basketball player's prime age. The Pistons went 50-32 throughout the regular season compared to the Lakers' 58-24 record. So Los Angeles would have had home court advantage, which is definitely significant. They split the regular season series at 1 game apiece, with the Lakers blowing out the Pistons by 24 points in the first game in LA, and the Pistons winning the second game in Detroit by 6 points in overtime. Magic was still performing at an MVP level, and had made an already talented Lakers team look even better with his incredible play. It's worth considering that James Worthy and Byron Scott missed some time in the NBA Finals due to injuries, so those injuries may or may not have occurred against the Pistons, but regardless, Los Angeles was simply playing better team basketball throughout the season. The Lakers won the 1991 championship without Jordan around. In the 1992 NBA Finals, the Chicago Bulls defeated the Portland Trail Blazers in 6 games, but the Bulls defeated the Cleveland Cavaliers in the 92 East Finals, which means the 92 Finals would have been between the Blazers and the Cavaliers. The Cavs of the early 90s are one of the forgotten great teams of that era, as they were led by great players like Brad Daugherty, Larry Nance, and Mark Price. Portland, on the other hand, had one of the deepest teams the Bulls had ever defeated, as they had numerous offensive contributors as well as experienced veterans with all-defense team selections. Both teams finished the regular season with a 57-25 record, but the Blazers won both regular season matchups with the Cavs, which means they would be the ones with home court advantage, which was an advantage that meant more in the 90s than it has in recent years. Combine that advantage with their overall depth and postseason experience, and I think the Blazers win the championship in 6 or 7 games. In the 1993 NBA Finals, the Chicago Bulls defeated the Phoenix Suns in 6 games, but the Bulls defeated the New York Knicks in the East Finals in 6 as well. So in this scenario, the NBA Finals are between Patrick Ewing's Knicks and Charles Barkley's Phoenix Suns. The two teams split the regular season series at 1 game apiece, with the Knicks winning a close one at home while the Suns blew them out in Phoenix. The Knicks won 60 games throughout the season and the Suns won 62, meaning Phoenix would have had home court advantage, where they had been extremely dominant throughout the season. Both teams had very deep rosters, but one of the big deciding factors in my mind would have been the superstars up top. People forget that even in a losing effort, Charles Barkley was an absolute monster in the '93 Finals, but he was simply outshined by Michael Jordan. Patrick Ewing, on the other hand, has had some great postseason performances, but he was also famous for folding in many instances where the games mattered most. Put him in a hostile Phoenix environment with a championship on the line, and unfortunately, I'll have a lot more trust in Barkley than I do in Ewing. I think Phoenix wins the championship in 6 games. In the 1996 NBA Finals, the Chicago Bulls defeated the Seattle Supersonics in 6 games, but the Bulls also swept the Orlando Magic in the East Finals, which means the matchup would have been Shaq and Penny's Magic versus Peyton and Kemp's Sonics. This is an extremely fun, hypothetical matchup between two of the greatest teams to fail to win a championship. The Sonics won 64 regular season games, and the Magic won 60. They also split the regular season series with each team winning at home. Now, although the Bulls likely dominate the Magic even if Orlando had been at full strength, it's still worth mentioning that people have forgotten Horace Grant's graphic injury in Game 1 that took him out of the series, so the sweep was a bit easier for the Bulls as a result. Assuming the Magic are at full strength, a matchup with the Sonics would have been an absolute classic series. Shaq is likely having a monster series, as he's taking advantage of the lack of a solid big to defend him, as neither Shawn Kemp or Detlef Schrempf had the size to handle Orlando's center down low. With that being said, other than Chicago, Seattle had the best defense in the league, and a suffocating Gary Payton likely
Gary
would
Payton, I ain't gonna lie, like that.
Seattle also had a
that's
top
not
10
nothing like
offense that could play
I
up
ain't
tempo
gonna lie,
style
like that
that would have been
energy. I ain't gonna lie, we
difficult
gotta
for
check out
Orlando
Gary
to handle,
Payton, man.
especially in the 4 games in Seattle. Ultimately, it would have been an epic series, but I'm going with the Sonics winning the championship in 7 games. In the 1997 NBA Finals, the Chicago Bulls defeated the Utah Jazz in 6 games, but the Bulls also beat the Miami Heat in the East Finals, meaning that the NBA Finals would have been between the Miami Heat and the Utah Jazz. Miami is another one of those great 90s teams that are rarely talked about, as they had a solid core of Tim Hardaway, Jamal Mashburn, and Alonzo Mourning, led by the Hall of Fame head coach, Pat Riley. Miami won 61 games throughout the regular season, and the Jazz won 64, and Utah won both matchups in the regular season. It would have been exciting to see 2 of the strongest players in the league in Alonzo Mourning and Karl Malone meet up in the paint. Especially in the late 90s, Utah was one of the hardest places to win basketball games, so home court advantage once again would have played a huge part. Combine that with Malone having an MVP season, and John Stockton being as reliable as ever, and Miami would have probably been dealing with more than they could handle. I think Utah comfortably wins the championship in 5 or 6 games. In the 1998 NBA Finals, the Chicago Bulls once again defeated the Utah Jazz in 6 games, but the Bulls also beat the Indiana Pacers in the East Finals in 7 games, which makes this new NBA Finals matchup between Reggie Miller's Pacers and Karl Malone's Jazz. Indiana won 58 games throughout the regular season, and the Jazz won 62, and the 2 teams split the regular season series with both games ending in a small deficit. Although the Jazz would have had home court advantage, Indiana would have been fine with that, as they were extremely poised and were a solid road team throughout the 97-98 season. With Karl Malone and John Stockton, Utah certainly had the bigger superstar names, and they bolstered the league's best offense statistically. But Utah was also in the bottom half of the league defensively, and that would have been an issue considering how deep and how many offensive weapons Indiana had between Reggie Miller, Jalen Rose, Mark Jackson, Rick Smits, and Chris Mullin. They could also try to make Utah uncomfortable with their physical enforcers, like Dale Davis and Antonio Davis, who both were once All-Stars. This is the only time where I'm taking a team without home court advantage, as I simply think Indiana was the deeper team and had the perfect play style and roster to counteract the Jazz's offense. the Pacers win the championship in 6 or 7 games. So now that we've come to conclusions on where the accolades and championships would have gone without Jordan in the picture, what are some noteworthy aspects and legacies that now stand out? Well, for one, Karl Malone would have 3 MVPs, 5 scoring titles, and 1 championship, to go along with the fact that he's in the 2nd spot on the all-time scoring list. With this resume, this probably means that Karl Malone is now rivaling Tim Duncan in the argument of the greatest power forward in NBA history. Dominique Wilkins now gets more recognition for his scoring prowess, as he now has 4 scoring titles to his name. Magic Johnson now has 6 rings and closes out his final full season with an MVP, a championship, and likely a Finals MVP. Due to this, maybe he's even leading the pack in the GOAT conversation now. And lastly, Hall of Famers like Clyde Drexler, Charles Barkley, Gary Payton, Shawn Kemp, Karl Malone, John Stockton, and Reggie Miller now all have championship rings in the prime of their careers, which launches each of their legacies to another level. It's amazing how significantly history changes by simply subtracting one really great player. Let me know in the comments section if you agree or disagree with these championship outcomes. Thanks for watching as always. Make sure
you probably know more than me, my brother, so I'll have to say I agree, my brother. Yeah. If you guys enjoyed this reaction, make sure you click on the last one and let me know if you guys agree. I know you guys probably know a little more than him. So let me know if you guys agree about which teams would have won, which teams who would have got those accolades and things like that. Last reaction on your screen right now. Turn on post notifications, and I'm out of here, man.